Okay, I'm a little late on this one. Number one, because I was at Dragon Con, and number two, because this episode is a little revolutionary. So if you don't know, there are three different versions of this episode that are served to you depending on the time of your download. So if you only knew there was one version, go to Welcome to Night Vale, the Reddit page. There's a post there that has direct hosting to all three versions, so that you don't have to rely on luck to figure out which version you're going to get, so that you can listen to the other two. I would say you should probably not listen to the rest of this video if you haven't listened to all three, because I am going to talk about all three endings, and just knowing what they are about could kind of spoil it a little bit for you. Basically, this was a crazy good idea. I love how it fits the regular format of the show, but is insanely different because even the weather is different. They're all by the same group, but it's three different songs. And then basically the episode is the same up until the weather. And then the weather and everything after it is completely different each episode. There's a really good adaptation of a Robert Frost poem called The Road Less Traveled in here, which adds like a Night Vale flair and creepiness. Like, I split myself into multiple versions and I don't know how. And you're like, it's good, but it's also beautiful at the same time. I really like that. Another detail in this episode was the Kellogg sponsorship from a couple of episodes ago, which seemed like, it was going to be like the next Strex Corp thing, like Kellogg's bought the whole town basically. And then it wasn't mentioned last episode at all, but it is still there. Like the only cereal in the grocery store is Kellogg's, so that's going to be a persistent thing, not a one-off thing. So we'll see how the plot deals with that eventually. One of the great highlights of this episode for me, and the part that didn't change, was Cecil gets a video from a sponsor. There's just a man making a sandwich at first, and then it replays, and he slices his hand while he's making the sandwich, and then it replays and he bashes his head on the counter, and then it replays and he goes outside and gets swallowed up by an earthquake. So like increasingly disturbing and bizarre things start happening to this guy, and the man in the video is aware that he's reliving the same moments, which is like I feel like you can make a whole horror movie out of that. Just, I'm reliving the same thing and like increasingly bad things start happening to me, and then it goes back and you're fine. I think they did just make a horror movie like that, if I'm not mistaken. Kind of like a horror version of Groundhog's Day. He says there's another 3 hours of the tape, but he doesn't listen to it, which is great. That's classic Cecil. Going into the alternate endings, the Telly ending, which is the first one I got, where Telly is the one causing all the time travel shenanigans, was great. It was a really good payoff after like such a long time not mentioning him, because that Telly is from way back at the beginning of the series. Like, he gave a bad haircut to Carlos very close to the beginning, and basically got ran out of town because Cecil said, what an awful haircut it was on the radio, and everybody ran him out. But it was good. Like, you always wonder, like, what happened to that guy? He got ran out of town and was like giving haircuts to cacti. And, in his ending, the time travel was just to basically, like, he's trying to go back to undo the bad haircut he gave Carlos, but it's good. I mean, and Carlos is in that ending, which had a lot of good things to say about forgiveness and like who has the ability to forgive other people and who should be involved in judging an action. Like, basically, don't judge an action unless you're one of the people involved. So basically, like, Cecil saying it's a bad haircut is meaningless. Did Carlos think it was a good haircut? That's the important part. The next ending that I got was Diane Creighton, where she goes back in time to sell more newspapers, but then tries to decide to change events to try and see what will sell more papers. She gets a lot of data about it, but I think it was a lot of good commentary on like the over commercialization of the press in the United States, which is part of the problem with the press right now. Like, everybody's frustrated with the media, whichever way you want to slice it, because like you have to understand, whenever you're consuming a commercial media type, like, they are getting viewers. That's their goal. It's not necessarily just reporting news. Like, they're trying to get as they want. So Diane finally figured out after finagling events, like it's actually better if you keep people in a state of fear because they buy more papers and they want to know what's going on because they're scared. And I think that's a very sad but true commentary on how the press works in the United States right now, especially certain segments of the press. The third ending I think, was the best, or it made the most sense. It was Earl Harlan, because he's already been associated with like weird time travel or like time dilation. Because when he was first reintroduced to the series, he states like he was 19 for like 20 years or something, and then also when he became the correct age again, he had a son that he never remembered. Now, a lot of this had to do with like the Night Vale multiverse thing with Huntokar and how that all resolved. Like there were multiple versions of Night Vale, which is why sometimes you'd have an episode and you're like, how'd they get done with that? And then next episode it's something completely different. Or like Cecil basically died when he was a kid, we think, in one reality, and another he doesn't. And the whole Night Vale ended in the 1980s because of Operation Able Archer or whatever. So I think that one fit the best with the time travel theme, but I think probably the Telly one was the one that was intended to be, I mean, which one was real? Cecil asked that in the episode, and Carlos asked it. But they seem to have spent a little bit more time working on the Telly ending because like they had Carlos in it as well. So whereas they didn't have the voice actors for Diane Creighton or Earl Harlan in their endings. So basically, I love this episode. I love that they were trying to do something new with the medium. Like they hyped it up a lot, which is why people knew there'd be something weird with it. But it was nice to see people like get very confused at first because they listened to the episode. They're trying to discuss it with someone. They're like, "Oh yeah, it was great how it was telling." Like, wait, I got Diane Creighton. And for people to realize, wait a minute, there's 3 versions of this episode. And now we're like, okay, which one really happened? Or are there more? Like, could there be a 4th one that no one's found yet? And who knows? The authors know. That could be it. I think this will definitely go into like one of my favorite episodes of Night Vale. I love the normal format of the show, which is still present in this episode a little bit, but I especially like it when they do something different as well, like a story about you, best of, the woman from Italy, like these episodes where they take the format and they're just like torch it and do something crazy that you don't expect. I think the writing and the creativity behind the show really has a chance to shine in those moments. But I think that the more normal episodes are necessary to set that up. So I'm glad that this episode still followed like the normal traffic, weather, reporting part of it, and rather than being completely out of it. So yeah, that's my short review here. Thanks for watching.